At the start of 398 AD, the Alani people still searched for new lands to call their own, although despite being hundreds of miles apart, they shared a similar foe in the form of the Romans. Despite the rumoured military strength of the Roman empires at this time, as previous records suggest, neither Respendial or Atticus had seen a Roman army stronger than a garrison as they sacked any town that they came across on their separate journeys. Perhaps they believed that the rumours regarding the strength of the legions was false. Sources cannot say. They were unaware, though, that the Romans are busy elsewhere against other hordes of refugees from the storm brewing in the steppes. Like a bear trying to fight off a pack of wolves, the Roman legions were too busy to worry about the islands, despite the amount of damage caused by them. Hello everyone, I am your host Warrior Angel, and welcome back to part 4 of A Tale of Two Cities. In the last episode, Respendial and the Seekers of Glory marched down and dealt with the Illyrians who had declared war on them, forcing them to become a client state of the Alani people after destroying their armies. With that done, they started heading up north, as you can see several vulnerable Western Roman towns are just ripe for the picking. Going over to the east side of the map, Atticus and the Wanderers are continuing their march through Eastern Roman lands. They recently attacked from Pisa, and there was a bit of a debate at this moment whether or not to go after Sinope up in the north, or continue my journey down south and go for Miltane. It took us all of a couple of seconds, to be completely honest with you, and I decided to go straight after Miltane. Unfortunately, the garrison was a little bit larger than I expected. They recently upgraded the town to a tier 2, so it increased the number of troops they got included in the Legio. But with the balance bar relatively in my favour, I decided to go for a balanced approach. Victory is still mine, but unfortunately though I left one of my unit of summation spears to die, which is slightly annoying because I can't actually replenish and recruit new ones, I should say, but on the other hand I can make do and get some new troops instead. So I decided I was going to sack the settlement, but I also had the option to liberate the faction of Pontus from the local people. No doubt they want to establish their own independence after throwing off the yoke of Roman oppression. So I decided I'd be more than happy to do so. They'll swear loyalty to me as a military ally, which is always a good thing to have, and it gives me an opportunity to have a safe place for Atticus and the Wanderers to be able to replenish. You see, it's still going to take a couple of turns before the army comes back to relatively full strength, but who's complaining? It seems though, as the town was sacked, that Atticus managed to pick up a military diploma as well, which increases his morale in allied regions as well as his own. The own bit is not so good when it comes to a horde, obviously, but it might come in handy if I ever have to retreat back to Miltane while dealing with the enemy. Next thing though is what to upgrade his stats for. I wanted to try, if I could, to get his cunning up to level 6, because that will allow me to do night battles, something which will be really useful against the Sassanid armies down in the eastern side of the map. Unfortunately though, there's no real way I could probably do it unless I'm able to get some sort of item maybe that increases his cunning, simply because of the stat increase. So I decided that the best thing for me to go for in terms of my stat increase is to go up to the next level with the spoiler, because I will increase the amount of money I'm going to get from sacking and looting, which is always a good thing to have when you're a horde. And I decided as well to go for the Raven. As you can see, increases my campaign's movements range, I should say, by 20%, as well as increase my cunning, not quite to level 6, but it does make things such as my army a little bit cheaper to run, which is no bad complaint at all. I sent Lexipoxus down south because I wanted to see what was going on with some of the more Roman lands down there, and it seems both Amida and Indessa are both pretty vulnerable again. There's no sign of Eastern Roman armies. I was quite curious to see this, since I have no idea. I haven't seen a single Eastern Roman army on this side of the map since Atticus has arrived. Both towns look pretty good for an assault. I'm just going to have to wait a couple of turns for the Wanderers to be able to replenish their numbers. It's going to take a little while for them to retrain new people. So heading back then over to the west side of the map, the first thing I wanted to do is check out the matter of states. It seems that the Flyting has been taking place, a big noble competition, and I had several options what to do for Respendial in this case. I could enter him himself, he could task a champion, or ignore the competition. I decided, since Respendial is quite the arrogant individual, he's not going to settle to allow a champion to take his place. He's going to actually take part in the fighting itself. So hopefully he would win. We'll just have to see how that goes shortly. Before coming off the family tree, I did notice when I was doing Atticus' skills earlier that he picked up a new trait, so I wanted to see what it was. Apparently in his travels, he's become a bit of a siege expert, which I'm not going to complain increases my morale and his commander's aura, as well as increases his authority for some reason. Go figure, eh? Anyway, with that dealt with now, I'm going to move the Seekers of Glory. Savaria was a tempting target, but as you can see from the smoke, they've actually been sacked recently, so I decided instead to go towards Verinum. The bounce bar is obviously in my favour, so I go for a protective stance, and Respendial does a pretty good job. He hacks the garrison commander down and allows me then to go after the town. Unfortunately though, there isn't really much in the way of money from this place, but I'm going to do something else instead. I'm going to show you a cunning trick that I picked up from watching Officially Devon's videos thanks to one of his commentators. If I use the Seekers of Glory and put them into raiding stance right outside the settlement, I can tell them to attack the settlement and raze it to the ground. You know, very severe punishment perhaps to the people, but therefore for not having much money. But more importantly, once the raising's been done, I can actually switch them from raiding stance back to normal stance and move them around perfectly like normal, despite the fact they have raised the settlement. It's a cheap little trick, but a very useful one nevertheless. So I decided to move the army a little bit further down and allow them to encamp, which will allow me to not only be able to build more troops, which now thankfully I've got access to an onager. Now this will be great to allow me to attack walled settlements very easily on the same turn without having to worry too much about getting siege equipment built. Coming out to do the army traditions, the most obvious choice is always domestic devotion. Increase that horde growth even higher, as well as the amount of wealth I make from agricultural buildings. The next one though, what the final point, is a little bit more tricky. Children of the Forest will allow me to improve morale and be the basis for the next level of things such as the Ruin of Rome, increasing my morale, and even Champions of the North, which will allow me to do with attrition. But I decided in the end to go for epic camp following, build up the amount of people that follow after the army and help out. As you can see, increases replenishment by 5%, as well as lowers my upkeep cost by a massive 10%. But it does mean that the army moves a bit slower because of all the extra people that are following it. It's okay though, there are plenty of stat updates you can do which will actually increase your movement speed once more, especially when you start taking into account some of the things like the cunning increase, the Raven ability or Stag ability, as well as some of the other army tradition upgrades. With that dealt with, I've decided to move a Garros now further down south into the north of Italy, where it seems that the Vandals already started making their way over. Maybe they plan to sack Rome a little bit early, who knows. Nothing else really left to do then, I decided to go ahead and end the turn. During the end turn phase, and Pontus actually wanted to marry Madam. They were actually offering a little bit of money for it. I think that's because I might have been slightly tempted to take the offer, but I felt personally that I could maybe use Madam in another situation. Maybe marrying her off to one of the other factions, such as Armenia, to try and bring them over to my side a little bit better. It'd be useful to have Armenia, in my opinion, as an ally. So I decided just to go ahead and actually reject the offer. Anyway, with that dealt with, it's not long until it's the start of my next turn. But I get given the news that my Imperium level is increased. This isn't as great as it might sound. I can't get any more agents. I don't have the ability to really get any more armies. Not worried about governors. It just makes it a bit more difficult for me to negotiate now with some of the factions. The results of the flighting, though, show that Respendial has actually done very good for himself. He's increased his influence by 10%. He's gained the trait Smooth Talker, as well as increased the contentment of his people for an extra 3 turns. I'm going to look though for the rest of the event messages. Seems Armenia has decided to change their religion now to Celestian. Not that good of news, considering now they've become closer to the Sassassid people, where it means if I go to war against them, I'm going to have an enemy between my client states and myself. Going through the rest of the stuff, there isn't really anything new. The Vandals and Illyrians have declared peace, which is good for me. And it seems that Respendial picked up the Smooth Talker trait, which as you can see really helps with the amount of money I get from a trading agreements. The only annoying thing is I haven't actually got any trade agreements because I'm a horde and we don't actually get them. So once that was done, I was looking at the Seekers of Glory and noticed this tempting target. It seems Favinius Favinius, the actual Roman Emperor, has decided to dock his army, and his navy I should say, at the port of Aquileia. Now, unfortunately, though, despite being a tempting target, thanks to the guardhouse that got built there, as well as the town garrison, it means there's going to be quite a number of troops there. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity for the Seekers of Glory to be able to go after an emperor of the Romans. And despite the garrison being in place, I thought I'll send the Seekers of Glory after them. The garrison couldn't do anything, which was quite annoying. But nevertheless, Respendial takes the Seekers of Glory down south to try and deal with this Roman emperor. The balance bar is very much in my favour, and despite the fact I haven't had a battle this turn so far, I decided instead just to go and auto-resolve it once more. Like I've always said, I don't really like doing battles when I know it's clear in my favour. So Respendial does the job. He kills the garrison commander, decides to go ahead and kill the Roman emperor and his whole fleet, and allow me then to do what I want with Aquitania. You consider yourself a king of kings, an imperator in the tongue of your people, but what I see before me is nothing but a shriveling fool. Your kingdom, your empire, rots from the inside thanks to people like you. The children of such people as Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Constantine should be worthy successors of this empire, not scum like yourself. Your ancestors would curse you if they could. I will kill you, there's no denying that, Imperator. But before you pass to face God's judgment, make your choice. Will you accept death like a Roman, as the emperor you claim to be? Or would you die a coward, as I believe you are? With the Roman emperor dealt with, I went ahead and sacked the town, taking every single penny and valuable thing that the army can find, pretty much, which wasn't bolted down, before it decided to do the same trick as I did before. I put the Seekers into raiding stance, raise Aquileia to the ground, and then allow them then to be able to move off afterwards. You could argue this was a bit extreme, but Respendial has shown so far that he is willing to sack and destroy settlements, whereas Atticus has only done it once, if I remember right, and because he felt he had to. So with that done then, the Seekers of Glory now have managed to encamp, and I take a garrison down south to stop the 7th Legion from being able to move up to the Seekers. I did notice that Flavius Neotirius is now the new Roman Emperor, so well, that was quite a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting them to turn up so quickly. But nevertheless, the garrison is pretty successful in misdirecting the army. Unfortunately though, even though he was successful, it still left the 7th Legion with enough movement points to be able to attack the Seekers of Glory. Quite a bit annoying, especially when I saw then that Agaros had upgraded. And one of the items he's managed to pick up as part of his household is, as you can see, a Catty Trapper, I believe that's how you pronounce it, which actually reduces the amount of movement that an army suffering from misdirected army suffers even more. But nevertheless, at least it allows me to build him up slowly but surely. So I went ahead and just increased his zeal, as well as give him the scout army ability. Given the fact that the Seekers are a bit slower now, thanks to their entourage, I thought it might be better to have the ability at least to get them to go a bit quicker if Agaros is with the army. Over on the eastern end, Lexipoxius is continuing now into Sassanid lands. I haven't seen any sight of them so far, and even on their borders with the Romans, I still can't find one, although we did manage to find one of their agents over on the side there. I wonder what happened to the Sassanid army and whether or not there will be somewhere around in the area. Who knows? The Wanderers, though, in the meantime, continue to try and replenish their forces. It's going to take a little while, though, and I figured it was going to be a little bit quicker for me, actually, if I decided just to go ahead and buy some more units with the amount of money I've got, rather than have to wait for them to replenish. I've still got 16 slots as well, so I've got plenty of opportunities to try and upgrade. So I went ahead then and got a nice little mixture of troops. I figured again some Sarmatian warband would come in handy despite the strong cavalry presence in the Wanderers, because they are good swordsmen and got quite good stats for the first tier troops. So, but really making my mind, I end up going around and doing a couple of variations before finding something I was pretty happy with. Okay. After all that then was done, there wasn't really much else I could do at this turn. Okay, the Seekers had moved, the Wanderers were done, so I just went ahead and ended the turn. During the end turn phase, I got the news that the Huns had attacked my client state, the Bastarians. Fortunately, though, I had no love for the Huns, and the Bastarians haven't really liked me the whole time. They feel pretty impressed, even though we had nothing really to do with them. So I went ahead and just broke the alliance and allowed the Huns to do with them as they wished. At the start of my next turn, I get a couple of notifications to go through, the first of which is an illegitimate birth. It seems that Attaces has been a naughty boy and has now got an illegitimate daughter. This isn't going to make things that comfortable in his tent now from now on, but not only that, I really wished that Respendil's sons kept it in their pants. The Forgotten Ones, I had this mission a while back of asking me to defeat the army in battle. I thought the mission would have been cancelled, considering the fact that Kartley is now a client state of my people. But obviously they decided to keep the mission going, so maybe the Council of Nobles was a bit slow on the uptake. I also get this mission as well that I have to raise an army within 6 turns. Unfortunately though, none of my hordes have actually got the growth, and while I do want to raise a 3rd army at some point, it's going to be a long time before I can even consider doing that. The next stop now, it seems that the 7th Legion have now built up in force quite a bit. They've got a strong force, as you can see there, of Combatanese spears, as well as a few skirmishing units and that. But I'm going to have to try and maybe deal with them eventually. I could actually go down and attack the town, but I decided I still wanted to try and get my forces a bit more replenished, especially the horsemen. So I decided to try and move them just onto the top there. I'm hoping that if the 7th Legion did come after the Seekers, I'm in a strong position to be able to force them away. And I'm still outside the garrison's range, so they wouldn't have been able to bring in any as reinforcements. As you can see, they haven't got that many, but still, every little bit helps, does it not? They do have a lot, though, because of the fact they upgraded the town to the next level, which would increase the wealth for if and when I decide to sack it. Going for the event messages now, there's nothing really there, although we got this news that Sassassid is now back for duty. I wasn't really sure what that meant to begin with, but I checked out the family tree, and it seems that Sassassid now has the same level of experience as his father, Respendial, who he was originally a retainer to. Unfortunately, though, it means I can't actually get him as a retainer to Respendial until Respendial levels up, which is going to require more battles in the future. It does give me a nice lot of skill points to spend on Sassassid, and I do plan for him to eventually lead part of the Seekers of Glory, lead his own horde. This is the case of waiting for the growth of the Seekers of Glory before I'm able to do that. Agawes continues to try and hassle the army of Flavius Neotorius and the 7th Legion, hoping to try and misdirect them, which he gets another success for. It doesn't level up this time. A little bit unfortunate. I was kind of hoping he was, but you can't get upgrades every single time, otherwise upgrading your agents would be a lot more easier. Heading back to the east then, Lexipoxis is still continuing on his journey east. I'm surprised that he's managed to pass for a local so easily, or maybe he's planning to pretend to be a travelling merchant, who knows. But we're continuing to just to take a wander through, and it can't seem to find any sign of a Sassassid army anywhere. I'm going to have to keep an eye out though. For the meantime though, I'm perfectly happy just going after the Eastern Romans, although the Sassanids will be a target in the future. There's not really much else I can do this turn, unfortunately. I can't move the Wanderers. As you can see, I'm still recruiting Sarmatian warbands, so I decided to just go ahead and end the turn once more. During the end turn phase, not really much happened, apart from the Huns taking a long time, no doubt raising some settlement to the ground. Only though for this to happen. The 7th Legion marches out of Verona and decides to try and deal with the Seekers of Glory. As you can see, the balance bar is relatively in the middle, maybe slightly more to me if you to go by the slashed bit. And looking at the enemy army, though, I was a little bit surprised to see some of their troops. As you can see, they've managed to levy some Germanic band from someone, maybe a passing horde or something. So they've actually got Germanic band proper soldiers in their armies, as well as Germanic hurlers. Nevertheless, though, they had a lot of Combatanese spears, and I feel pretty confident that my swordsmen and my other units would be able to deal with them. So I decided I'm going to fight it out on the battlefield, though. I decided to just scout the terrain and see what it's going to be like, and it does take a little while for the thing to come up. So, but what it basically is, it looks like I'm going to be deployed on a hill with me at the top, and I just have to wait for the enemy forces to march towards me. A pretty ideal situation, allowing them to get tired. So I thought, yeah, this is worth a battle. So I decided just to go ahead and fight this on the map, and I'll see you there in just a second. Before the battle commences, I just wanted to quickly go through the situation. You can see the Roman army in the far distance, although I couldn't see them at this point of the battle. And it seems the terrain button was wide. I've actually deployed on top of this massive hill. I think it's technically a mountain, to be completely honest. But it's going to be a perfect place for me to be able to deploy my troops. in a position to be able to allow the Romans to try to attack me. I decided to go for a rather standard formation, spearmen in the front with archers in front of them, my Sarmatian warband behind them, and then my Respendial and his nobles providing support. The onagers were facing the wrong way initially because I had plans to try and move the whole army up into the corner to rely on the red line of death to secure my flanks, but I decided I felt pretty confident though to try and do it another way. All my horsemen are deployed down on the left flank. I was actually going to be splitting them up pretty soon. And as you can see, over on the far left, I decided to deploy my Sarmatian spears and my war dogs. I did have plans to try and maybe seek them around and attack the enemy from behind and stuff. Fortunately, though, they ended up just staying there for a little while and then being power marched as quickly as possible to join up with the main force. Going to check out the Roman army. They've gone for a very similar deployment. They put all their missile troops on the front line, heavy blocks of combatanista spears behind them, along with both a Germanic warband unit and their cohorts behind them as support. They got pikemen, interestingly enough, although I think they deployed them in quite the wrong place. Horsemen on their left, and their general, the Emperor himself, is marching quite far behind his troops. Maybe he's a bit nervous about trying to fight the Alans after the fact that they've killed the last Emperor, so he's decided to stay back and allow his troops to try and engage with my people first before he gets involved. As you can see then up in the far distance, I started putting my horsemen into two different groups, and my dogs remained there and continued to do so for a little while. I wanted to check out then the enemy reinforcement army, although I could just make out 1 or 2 units at this point. They're a little bit more ragtag. They seem to just be consisting of different units. Although, just for anyone's interest, this is the unit of Levy axe troops that they must have picked up somewhere along the line. They still look pretty Germanic to me, although that could be just me, my thing. And here's got the enemy of the other general leading his Palatino guard, although they've got a long walk in front of them in order to try and even join up with their main force. More interesting enough, though, their main force is actually being spurred on by the Emperor, perhaps, charging as fast as they can. This is really going to tire them out, and when they really didn't need to do this. Okay, going back to my army then, it was just a case of waiting for the enemy to arrive. I've got my onagers now in perfect position to be able to rain down fire when they get into range. It's going to take a long time, though, for them to be able to come up, so we'll be back in just a second. In God's name. The waiting is the part of the battle I hate the most. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that the king decided not to make us push these onager all the way up the hill over there. If you can call this a hill, that is. Seems like a sodden mountain to me. Much simpler to just stay here and save us some work. But now we have to simply wait for the Romans to be considerate enough to get in range so we can give them a warm welcome. I know my eyes aren't what they used to be, but there's still barely a speck in the distance. I know. I'm gonna have a nap. Somebody wake me up when it's time to shoot. Quite a bit later on, eventually then the onager starts to attack. Well, I say onager because I'm the one actually controlling this one by myself. And to be fair, I was a bit impressed with the accuracy of my shots, despite the fact I was aiming at such a far range. On the other hand, though, in the AI's defense, they had such a compact formation, it was very difficult for me to actually miss, even if I wanted to. But as you can see, there's only just one shot coming in at a time, so bam! Again, another few hits being done, and it's forcing the army, well, the Roman army to try and just branch out a bit more, get themselves into a more looser formation to try and defend themselves against the onager shots. Eventually then, it's not just me shooting as the AI starts kicking in with the other onagers, and they've managed to cause some severe damage. I think at this particular one on the left, those 3 shots managed to do a hell of a lot of damage to a combatanista's spear. I managed to nearly knock them down to half health. Yes, in fact they did. So the AI is starting to branch out. They're still marching on against this heavy fire thing, but they're taking severe casualties on the way, which is only going to help me out. Especially when it comes to things like this axe warband. They're pretty good against my swords. I wanted to try and cause as much damage as I could to them, so then they're not going to be able to do anything towards them. And my onagers are just continuing to rain fire down. It's still going to be a little while before they even get close enough, but eventually my archers will start taking shots as well. A little bit later on, my steppy levy are just looking on as the enemy get closer and closer. They're still taking fire from my onagers, although it won't be too long until they get within range of my archers. Their horsemen decide to veer off towards my right in an attempt to outflank me, although I do have horsemen in position more than capable of holding them off. And as well as the fact that my archers are now starting to pick out targets. They managed to pull this amazing feat of archery off there. They managed to shoot their arrows sideways, despite the fact they were looking onwards, to cause some casualties to the enemy horsemen, but not as many as I would have liked. As at this point then that the enemy's crossbowmen managed to get within range, you can see their bolts shooting by, so I decided to move my Germanic archers behind my steppy spear line, so they can continue to attack the enemy behind the safety of my spears. Over on my right flank, the horsemen are again attacked by the other units, Scout Attaces and mercenary brigades. Fortunately though, my horsemen are more than capable of dealing with them, and managed to drive them off pretty sharpish. Heading towards the centre then, my onagers are still causing damage, this time now to the skirmishing units, and I moved my horsemen up on the left flank into just a bit closer so they can go down and eventually deal with the skirmishers. Despite all this missile fire from my archers, my Sarmatian warband, my onagers, the enemy's combatanese spears continue marching and are soon engaged with my front line of spearmen. At this point then, I send my Sarmatian warband down, but they're very good soldiers, very good swordsmen, and against combatanese spears can easily handle them a lot better than most swordsmen I've encountered, maybe with the exception of the Gothic warband from the Ostrogoths and Visigoths. Oh, that's just my personal opinion. Over on the left flank then, I've sent off all my horsemen in order to try and deal with the skirmishers as well as the horsemen on my right. I also originally sent off some war dogs in order to try and chase them down, but I felt it'd just be better to just keep them back in the end and allow my horsemen to do the job. So my Sarmatian bands continue to stay in position while my horsemen deal with the skirmishers. Going back to my front line then, you can see that a lot of the enemy is starting to retreat. Their combatanese spears are just not up to fighting my spear wall and my Sarmatian band. And more impressively, it won't be too long until right behind them, you can see that unit of Germanic pikemen have actually been driven off. They've taken some huge casualties from the onager that decided to target them. I was a little bit concerned they were going to go after my horsemen, but fortunately then it seems that the onagers dealt with them for me. Now I send my war dogs in, where they should be able to chase down the survivors and do quite a bit of damage to them. There are still a couple of them, the combatanese spears there, for example, they're continuing to try and march down in an attempt to fight off my horsemen. Fortunately my dogs are holding them in place. And with a lot of my spear line now engaged, especially as you can see over on our left flank, I decided eventually to try and bring in my troops to support the centre. Not that I really needed to, as you can see the enemy is still taking a few casualties. Their warband, their axes, have gone down to a fraction of their strength. I expected them to do a lot better against my troops than they actually did. It's not too long to another unit to out in, there's other ones getting attacked. And the enemy is still no closer. In fact, if you see the mini-map in the background there, their leader, the Emperor Flavius Neoturius, is still staying far away from the front line. Maybe he is concerned about the strength of the Alan people and their horsemen, but he's remaining as far back as he can, which means that he's not any use to keeping his own troops' morale up. To deal with them then, I decided to send in my horsemen on my left flank, including my Sarmatian cataphracts. Those spears are going to cause some damage to the enemy, but unfortunately though, the enemy that got the damage was not the ones I wanted. They actually ran into a unit of combatanese spears that were retreating, so that really checked their charge, and plus caused my frame rate to drop a bit, as you can see just then. Fortunately though, my graphics card isn't the best, so when I do try and zoom in, it is a bit choppy, or quite choppy at times, but I think it adds to the immersion, so I'm going to continue to do so. Here comes Flavius Notorious, who is now marching quite fast. Unfortunately, they're not going to, like I said, they're not in a position to do anything really. And he should have just stayed behind and waited for the reinforcements, who are still so far behind. They're not going to be much use for Flavius in this near future. As he gets up closer, he decides he's going to single-handedly try and charge my wall, which is quite an impressive feat. My war dogs come down and trying to do some damage anyway, but it doesn't seem that they're actually be able to pull anyone down until about now, and all of a sudden they're losing more and more units without even thinking about it. They're actually losing quite decisively, even as a matter of fact. Nevertheless, I felt pretty confident then of trying to deal with them with my horsemen once more, so I decided to rely on the same tactic that's done me so far so well against Romans. I split up my horsemen back into their 2 units and deploy them on either side. Whichever one's going to cause Flavius to engage their front, the others will be able to attack them from behind. At this point, I also call in my dogs back to the Sarmatian spears to get them out of the way so my archers can cause a lot more fire to them. They're going to be using heavy arrows, so they are going to take some damage. But again, not as many as I like, despite the fact people say that Attila is supposed to be a game where cavalry and missile troops always work. To my experience, it's not always the case. The cavalry, perhaps, but not so much the missile troops. Flavius then takes his troops towards my cavalry on my left flank, which allows me to try and engage them a bit from the ones on the right. Of course, as the AI is smart enough to realise that having a rear charge from my cavalry is not the best thing for his unit to face, they turn around to face them, only for my other unit to try and charge them from the rear instead. Sandwiched between all my cavalry, the Flavius and his people are not going to last too long. They've taken massive casualties already, and it's not too long until they lose all their men and flee. I was quite surprised though, it did take a little while for Flavius to be killed by my horsemen. But, there again, I should be surprised, they are the main bodyguard unit after all. And they're the AI, they seem to take longer to actually die than my own people do. But there you go, you get the news now, as you can see on the screen, that Flavius is now dead. Very great news for my people. And I can feel perfectly content with leaving his bodyguard to retreat. There's no point chasing after them anymore, especially since the fact that they're going to be disbanded straight away thanks to the death of their general. Maybe they kill themselves as well in disgrace, who knows. From my knowledge of the Roman bodyguards and what the Praetorians used to do, it wouldn't surprise me if they just took it as an acceptable loss. As you can see now, the enemy reinforcement armies finally made it more or less up close and thing. They've been marching all the way from one side of the battlefield to the other. They're all exhausted from the moving. And they're also not the most, well, not for having that much morale, especially considering their emperor is now being killed in front of their eyes. And their own general is actually in the far back once more for me to try and deal with another time. The horsemen start marching up then. They're obviously going to try and bring them up towards the left flank, then towards my other unit of horsemen, just like they did before. But I feel pretty confident again. It's not going to go any different than it did last time. Horsemen patiently waiting up there for the enemy to tire themselves out before eventually charging down. I even decided to put my cataphracts into wedge formation just to try and do a little bit of extra damage against them. Annoyingly though, I forgot to actually take my archers off fire at will, which meant they were actually firing into the melee and caused a couple of casualties of my own troops. But not too many, I was able to correct them pretty quickly and send them off towards the slingers instead. The enemy's axes now are heading up now to engage, but there's so few of them, I feel pretty confident in sending one unit Steppe levy to kill off the enemy horsemen. Given the sheer amount of troops they're facing, as well as the stuff such as their general being killed, it's not too long until the enemy is retreated completely. Again, it's the same tactic as before. The horsemen, the infantry try and come up towards the front. I send my horsemen around the flanks ready to engage. Okay. The Steppe levy actually charging against the Axe warband, which thanks to my archery fire and the freshness of the Steppe levy causes the Germanic warband to retreat pretty quickly. Same again with the other Axe warbands, thanks to my Steppe levies, not too long until they start retreating. And looking at a little unit of pikes in the bottom there, they're really not sure what to do. They're continuing trying to turn around, and at this point I was sending a couple of my archers down and shoot arrows down there. I think one or two of my troops might have actually accidentally been sent to engage, but they in fact very quickly decided to flee. They're obviously not that brave, and in fact the enemy's general decides to flee as well. Despite not taking a single casualty, the enemy's bodyguard starts running away with their general. Probably don't want to face the same fate as their emperor, although I'm going to be dealing with that myself. The end of the battle then just consisted then of just dealing with the enemy troops as much as I can, and kill as many of them as I do before. Again, a decisive victory, where I decided eventually just to head back towards the campaign map. Chase them down, men. You know Sassus, my son. I can't decide whether these Roman emperors breed like rabbits or treacherous creatures. Barely half a year ago I killed one emperor who wasn't worthy of the name, And now we have another one who attacks us claiming to be the Emperor of the Romans. Not only that, but this one Neotirius, I can't decide what type of man was he. One moment he waits with his guards so far away from the battle that he's going to lead his men. The next he's running towards our spears by himself with no support from the others marching behind him. It seems to be an emperor, you need have to be mad indeed. Maybe they should learn if they want to remain emperor not to attack us, eh lad? Back on the campaign map, as you can see, we did extremely well. We only lost 146 men out of the horde, and in return managed to kill 1,542 of the enemy. If you check it out then, I haven't lost a single one of my units, whereas the 7th Legion has now been completely destroyed. The Emperor Flavius Neotirius is now lays dead at the feet of the Alani people, and Marcus Brocchus and the rest of his reinforcement army have been pretty much wiped out. There's only left 2 small units of horsemen. They're not going to be any point of consideration for me. The only thing left to do is decide what to do with the captives. I could have ransomed them back for a small sum of money. I could have killed them off, but I decided that I'm going to take them on instead. Vespedio probably respects the fact that these people managed to stay and fight even though the rest of them ran. And it does mean then that my army gets replenished a little bit quicker. So with that then, the 7th Legion is now destroyed and the survivors are sent running off towards Ravenna. At the start of my next turn, I get all the traditional notifications which emperors and generals were killed by the Seekers of Glory. We also get this news that a spy has tried to misdirect them and failed, which is good news. And then we get bad news. Sassassid's youngest son, his illegitimate son, has unfortunately passed away at the young age of 1. Maybe he found the travelling life of the Horde too much for him. But it's the loss I can imagine Sass has felt, and especially for it to be happening to such a young one at only 1 year of age. Bless him. Anyway, moving on, and then as you can see, Atticus is now at full strength, and we've already got a target picked out for him, the town of Amida. There is no army there, and a very small garrison. It's only worth an altar resolve, which he managed to do a pretty good job. He kills the enemy captain with his patented sword to the neck, and only lost 36 men, which is always good news to see. I did get an option to liberate a new faction, Orions, but I decided not to bother. I went ahead and sacked it instead. Thing is, I'm planning to try and capture as much of the east as the Alani people as I could, and it's not going to work if I've got to deal with a lot of military allies that I might have to go to war with if they keep trying to take the territory I want. So without sacking Amida, because that would allow Pontus to perhaps come and colonize it, I move Atticus and the Wanderers away from their zone of control and have a look to see what to do about their army traditions. The first one to always do is the domestic devotion, so it's now at the 2nd rank, and I decided out of the options to go for Children of the Forest. This will allow me to build up the Hunter's skill eventually, which will increase my attack range for all my infantry missile troops, or head down south so I can get the Bane of the East ability, which will improve my morale against eastern factions. Something I can imagine the Wanderers are going to have to be doing quite a bit of as they eventually go up against the Sassanids. Over on the west side of the map, the Seekers of Glory, as you can see, is still relatively at full strength, mainly thanks to all the replenishment they managed to take from the enemy 7th Legion in the last turn. Fortunately for them as well, Verona now looks like a good target for the Seekers to attack this time. So I take them off into normal stance and take them straight down to attack the town. The town does have a strong garrison, a lot stronger than Atticus had to deal with in the previous turn. But nevertheless, the Seekers of Glory are full strength, and the balance bar is so much in my favour, I decided once more to do a protective stance. Vespedio chops off the head of the enemy captain. Unfortunately though, I lost 1 unit of Sarmatian spears. It's always annoying when that happens. I always wonder why those particular units get killed. But nevertheless, it was okay. We went ahead and sacked the regiment once more, the town I should say. And I was tempted to actually consider maybe sacking it and doing it to the ground, although I did notice the Illyrians have now managed to capture Aquileia. But instead I had a bigger prize. Mediolanum, the actual capital of the Roman Empire, is now open to attack. Thanks to the onagers, I was able to go in and attack straight away, and the garrison fell to my troops pretty quickly, although, as you can see, I did take quite a few casualties across the board, but nothing I was too concerned about. I lost 210 men. So, nevertheless, it was a decisive victory, and as you can see, by sacking it, I got a huge sum of money, 2,987 coins. That's the sort of thing I'm not going to complain too much about. The only problem was then, it was deciding what to do about Mediolanum. I couldn't go into raiding stance because it didn't have enough movement points, so I couldn't just sack and burn it to the ground. And if I left them where they were or tried to encamp or what have you, I'd be forced basically to consider the idea that I'm going to be stuck in their zone of control. So I had no choice but to go ahead and raise the capital of the Roman Empire to the ground. Never mind, at least the Romans still have Rome, unless the Vandals manage to do something about it, or the Illyrians if they continue heading down south into Rome. Anyway, to try and deal then with Quintus, who was trying to manipulate my army in the end turn phase, I sent a Garros off in the hopes to try and deceive him. Unfortunately though, Quintus must have got news of this and prepared a trap, which caused Garros to actually be critically injured. He does manage to make it back though to the Seekers of Glory, which means that he can at least heal up from his wounds before continuing in his position as a scout. We'll just check out the rest of the family tree and see if there's anything I can do. I wanted to see about getting Sassassid to become a retainer for Respendial once more. Unfortunately though, they're both the same rank, so I couldn't do that. I'll quickly move Kadan down to join it, be a companion, and just check out whether or not I can do anything more with Atticus, since I could feel he could go up in the ranks by now. Unfortunately though, he's only 19 and the next rank elder requires him to be 22. Not sure how being 22 can be considered you as an elder, but there you go. So there's not really much I can actually do on the family tree list. So my next stop is actually going to diplomacy. I did mean to try and see if I can marry off Mada, Atticus' half-sister, to the Armenians. Try and improve my relationship with them and maybe get them as an ally, especially given how strong they are. They're the 5th strongest faction in the game. Unfortunately though, they decided to decline my offer. And I just wanted to have a look and see how everyone else was doing. And I was actually a little bit amazed about how much some of the factions have managed to capture and recolonize. It was actually worth having a quick look on the actual main map itself. Once, of course, I figured out how to make it so I can actually look at the provinces and see who owned them rather than looking at what I'm doing at the moment with regards to the attitude their faction is feeling towards myself as the Alani people. If you check out some Asia's, I can't pronounce the damn word, Asiatica, for example, it seems that they've managed to, all the other ones such as the Arans, the Abergia, I should say, and the Guethungians have all managed to colonize the desolate regions. It's a very useful mod, I think, the one to colonize, force the AI to colonize these regions, because it forces them to actually expand a bit. There's not really many areas which have been left desolate now, which is a nice change compared to what you normally see. Although saying that, maybe some of the areas such as up north, and there was one or two things such as Mediolanum, which obviously has just been destroyed, as well as, for example, one or two areas of Dacia. But again, I really like the mod, and for anyone who's watching this, I completely recommend it. Finally then, I think that was everything I could do, so I decided to end the turn once more. During the end turn phase, it soon got to the Western Roman Empire's turn, and I was just wondering what they were going to try and do this time round, as they were taking a little while. They brought an army down, as you can see, and I thought they were just going to leave it there. But I was quite surprised to see the survivors, those 2 units of horsemen that survived that last battle, have actually decided to come up with a small reinforcement army to try and take out the Seekers of Glory. Unfortunately though, for me, the balance bar is slightly more in their favour. As you can see, my units are still quite a bit desolate from the previous attack on Mediolanum, and I was quite surprised to look at the enemy reinforcement army and see all these onagers, as well as some weird troops such as Nordic Axe warbands. I don't know where the hell this reinforcement army came from, but I was quite surprised to see what they got, and given the amount of onagers they've got as well, it's going to be slightly worrying. Looking at the map though, it does look like I'm actually going to be at a disadvantage as well. It looks like I'm going to be at the bottom of the hill or the slope, and the enemy's going to be on the top. But fortunately though, I might be able to rely on them trying to march down towards me once more, where hopefully they'll be tiring themselves out and I stay out of the range of their onagers. But anyway, that's going to be all sorted in the next episode of the Phoenix Rises. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I shall see you next time. Bye for now. The year 398 AD was a dark time for the Romans of the Western Empire. In the space of 1 year, the Seekers of Glory sacked a fortune of gold and other valuables in northern Italy, killed 2 emperors in battle, and razed the capital of the empire, Mediolanum, to the ground. No force in memory had done so much damage to the empire in centuries, and the year passed into Italian history as the Black Year, which is still recognized today. Over in the east, the Wanderers were careful not to cause so much desolation in the land. In fact, Atticus' name was known to some as a liberator of the people, a man who fought alongside the people of Pontus to secure their freedom from their overlords. Even today, a statue of Atticus stands in the square of Melitene that has stood for over the years despite the invasion of the Mongols in the 12th century.